today's podcast. I'm Pat Soldano, president of Family Enterprise USA and Policy and Taxation Group. If you don't know who we are, we advocate for generationally owned family businesses and their lifetime of savings at a national level in Washington, D.C. We represent all sizes of business and all industries. Today, we're here with Representative Greg Steube, who is a Republican from Florida's 17th District, the Sun Coast, which includes Sarasota, Charlotte, and the Charlotte counties. He's also the co-chair of the Main Street Tax Team and a member of the Congressional Family Business Caucus, which we really appreciate his support of that caucus because it's so important for family businesses. If you don't know his background, he served for 2 years in the Florida Senate and 6 years in the Florida House. He graduated from the University of Florida with both an undergraduate and law degrees, and after 9/11 enlisted in the U.S. Army while still in law school. He became a U.S. Army JAG Corps lawyer and served as the chief of detainee operations for Multinational Division North in Iraq and with the 25th Infantry Division in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom from 2006 to 2007. In Congress, he serves on the House Committee on Ways and Means, which is very important because that's where tax legislation starts, specifically as the co-chair of the Main Street Tax Teams, and he's an advocate for policies that support Florida and the country's family businesses. Representative Steube, it's great to have you with us here today. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
So let's get right into it. Of course, we want to talk about family businesses. So as I already mentioned, you are the working co-chair on the Main Street Tax Teams. How's this going, and how do you see challenges for Main Street and family businesses?
Yeah, it's going great. I've had roundtables in my district. Lloyd Smucker, who's the chairman of the tax group, has had roundtables in his district as well. So we've had these type of working group meetings and roundtables all across the country to hear from business leaders about the impacts of TCJA when it first passed, if it expired, what impact that would have on their business. And obviously now, thankfully, with Trump in the White House, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate, we for the first time have the opportunity to do historic things as it relates to taxes. And this is our one opportunity to do it. Typically we lose seats in the midterm. We're only probably looking at a 4 or 5 vote majority. TCJA expires at the end of this year. So we've got a year of strong Republican leadership to get this done.
Well, thank you. That's so important. We agree. We know all about the provisions in TCJA, and I'm glad you brought it up because that's what we're going to have a discussion around today. Let's just talk about, are there any specific provisions, and we'll get into the individual provisions, but any specific provisions that you see being discussed the most as it relates to that tax policy?
I think everything that was a part of TCJA will be made permanent. And then I think you'll see things like the death tax repealed, obviously the 199A deduction that the Main Street Group has been working on that was part of TCJA, that tax cut will remain permanent. I mean, if that were to expire, that's a 20% increase in taxes on small businesses all across America. We've had people come to the Ways and Means Committee and give testimony as to what that impact would be on their small businesses, and it would be catastrophic. They'd have to lay people off. I was talking to a business owner the other day, and he's a very small business, and he said if that reinstituted, that's an employee and a half for him. So from small businesses to medium-sized businesses, it would be a huge impact, but I would expect 199A to become permanent at the level that we are at. I would expect the death tax, the estate tax, R&D, all of the things that were in TCJA to be included in this tax package. And then I'll see things like what the president campaigned on, no tax on tips. Those type of things obviously are now going to need to be discussed because he campaigned on it, and obviously the president's going to want those type of provisions in this big tax package.
Well, that's very, very important. We did a survey of over 100 family business owners, and to your point, we asked them what were their most important tax policies. Number one was keeping that lifetime exemption for the estate tax, because as you said, so many family businesses need that and can plan with that exemption. And then second was the income tax rates. As you mentioned, family businesses take advantage of 199A, but even with that, they're still paying higher rates than corporate America. So having that income tax rate go back up would be very, very difficult. And as you already mentioned, maintaining 199A is important. And then, restoring R&D expensing, also high on their list. One of the things they also mentioned, though, is the wealth tax. And there was a lot of discussion around the wealth tax, as I'm sure you're aware, specifically in the Senate, where there was 20 senators that supported a tax on unrealized gains. Now, with the Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate and the White House, do you see that wealth tax concern going away?
Yeah, I don't expect there to be any tax increases on any American, regardless of their wealth status. You're not going to see any increase in taxes. You're going to see significant cuts. You're going to see TCJA made permanent. You're going to see all these little things that, like, Trump campaigned on, the no tax on tips. There's little provisions like I've worked on disaster tax relief that I would like to make that permanent and not require an act of Congress each time our communities are hit by natural disasters. So there's little things like that that I think I would certainly advocate to be in the overall package, but you're certainly not going to see anything increasing the corporate rate, increasing the wealth tax. I certainly wouldn't support that. And with a clean sweep with Trump in the White House, with a Republican Senate and a Republican House, you're not going to see that.
So, but let's talk about the realities. That would be fantastic. And we hope you can achieve that. And we want to help you achieve that because family businesses are so important to this country. We've learned that 87% of the businesses in America are family-owned businesses, and they generate 59% of the jobs and 54% of the GDP. But one of the things that's going to be a little bit of a stumbling block is going to be the cost, right? And as we know, to totally institute those tax provisions that are in TCJA is going to cost over $4 trillion net of revenue. And that doesn't take into consideration some of the things you talked about, which is, President Trump wants to do, which is no tax on tips, no tax on first-time responders and the military, Social Security. Those things are going to cost money. So how do you see that playing out in terms of the loss in revenue that could be created by reestablishing these tax provisions?
Yeah, that is going to be the political challenge in the House. There's a lot of conservatives that believe that you should have to pay for tax cuts. One of the things that we have talked about is demanding that CBO include in the economic increase and the economic benefit in that number that they're gonna make on whatever the bill looks like. We have 5 years of TCJA numbers to look at. We saw how much that increased the overall income to the Federal Reserve because you're helping the economy. Businesses are growing, more people are paying taxes. So we are hopeful that, and we're going to tell them to take that into consideration when they give the quote unquote score to us. But I'm one of those Republicans philosophically that doesn't believe we have to pay for tax cuts because we're not spending money. But I 100% support cutting the federal bureaucracies that we have up here. I'm all for cutting spending to pay for the tax cuts. I think regardless, take the tax cuts out of the discussion altogether. I think we have to have some very serious discussions on cutting spending up here in Washington because of the debt that we are looking at, the deficits that we are running, and with the Republican House, Senate, and White House, we have to look at that. So I kind of support an overall approach to this. I don't think you have to pay for the whole thing because the tax cut's going to pay for itself, but I do support massive cuts in spending. President Trump's talked about doing away with the entire Department of Education. There's a lot of things that we can do in discretionary income to help pay for it. There's a lot of things in reform that we can do on SNAP and TANF and all these social welfare programs that can help tremendously pay for it. So there's a lot of things that we can do. I mean, even looking at the foreign aid, we've given $120 billion to Ukraine. I don't think that's going to continue under a Trump presidency. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at as it relates to a pay for, but you got it right. That is going to be the political challenge in the House because there are some Freedom Caucus members that believes that you have to pay for a tax cut, even though I believe economically it pays for itself in the long run. And so that's going to be the challenge, is getting people in our own conference to agree to it if part of it is not paid for directly in spending cuts. So that's going to be the real challenge. And we haven't had, since the election, the committee hasn't had a meeting. We were supposed to have one yesterday, but we got delayed with some things that are going on in conference because everybody's, the new members are here. We're trying to go through leadership elections and rules of elections, but that's going to be the challenge. When Ways gets back next week and we start discussing that, the strategy of that is going to be very important because I think there's some senators that are going to care about that too.
I'm so glad you brought up the dynamic scoring because for 20 years I've heard about dynamic scoring. Finally, it's been legislative, so it is required for major tax policies, but it doesn't seem like it resonates as much as it should. So I'm totally supportive of your idea and support, of course, dynamic scoring, which takes into consideration behavioral changes, as you pointed out. So the economy does change when you lower taxes, but that's always been a challenge to try and get people to understand and to put the numbers around that. So, but let's talk about timing, because that's obviously very important as well. What do you see? How fast do you see this getting done? Obviously, it has to happen in 2025, but do you have any sense of a timeline?
Yeah, so Congress swears in on the 3rd. We certify the election results January 6th. The president gets sworn in January 20th. It is my hope that we will work in earnest, at least in the first quarter, because we have to go through the procedural process of going through the committee, which is what Republicans will do. We'll go through a committee process, pass it out of the committee, and that's obviously going to take a little bit of time. But it is my hope that we get a tax bill out of the House by the first quarter of next year, because you're going to need to give the Senate time to do the things that they're going to do. It's going to have to be part of a reconciliation package so that we don't need 60 votes in the Senate. It'll require only 50+1. So that also takes time to move through that process of reconciliation on the Senate side. And I'm sure the Senate's going to have differing views on certain provisions and send the bill back to the House, and it'll go back and forth. So hopefully, it is my anticipation, I have not talked to the chairman since the election, but it's my anticipation that the leaders of the two committees, the chairman, Jason Smith of the House Committee on Ways and Means, and the chair in the Senate, Crapo, will iron a lot of this out in the lame duck period, so that when January hits and we all get sworn in on the 3rd, after the election results are certified on the 6th, we can start working on the bill and readying it for the committee before the president even gets sworn in. You can move that through the House as quick as you want to, but it's still going to take a period of time. Obviously, you got to get the CBO costs and all the different things that go with that. But it is my hope that in the first quarter, the House passes a tax package at the very latest 6 months. So which is fast under Washington standards to get things out that quick. But as you said, we have that deadline for the end of the year. We have to get that done. President Trump's going to want to get his signature pieces of legislation done in the first 100 days. So it is, I would hope that we could get a bill out of the House in the first 100 days to get it to the Senate, have ironed out the differences before that so it can be a smooth reconciliation bill in the Senate, and then it moves to the president's desk for signature.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, family businesses are really watching this closely, to say the least. So TCJA is the most important thing for family businesses in America. But I also want to bring up, before we close, one other issue, that's the Corporate Transparency Act. And the Corporate Transparency Act, as I think you're probably aware, has hurt family businesses, small businesses as well, because it really requires them to divulge a lot of personal, private information. I know where we are with the Corporate Transparency Act. It's still on the books. There's efforts to repeal it. There's a court case out there right now around that. But do you see any changes on the horizon as it relates to the Corporate Transparency Act?
Well, this is the time that we have the opportunity to make changes to something like that. You've got Elon Musk and Vivek that are doing this deregulation, looking at federal government, the impact that has on small businesses. So hopefully that'll be part of the conversation. I think there'll be a lot of things that these different agencies can do from a rulemaking perspective to upend all of the horrible regulation that the Biden administration put in place. I certainly would support repealing that. That's something that when the new Congress gets seated, you have to file new bills. So even though I'll still be a member, I'm in a member of Congress now, and I'll be a member after swearing in, we have to refile our bills for the 119th. So I certainly hope that that's part of the conversation.
We really appreciate that, and we really appreciate you. Is there anything we can do to help you, help the other members of Congress as family business owners? We cover every state. Certainly we're in Florida. What can we do to help you in getting this TCJA provisions restored and maybe even made permanent, so family businesses have some certainty and permanency?
I would encourage all of your viewers and everybody that is part of your organization to contact their members of Congress, contact their senators, and let them know how important that this is to them. We have a unique opportunity in history. This does not happen very often where you have a Republican in the White House, a Republican in the Senate, a Republican House during a time where tax cuts are expiring. We have a very golden opportunity to reset and reshape tax policy for the United States for generations to come and make things permanent. So don't hesitate to reach out to your members and let them know how important this is to your business, what it would mean to your bottom line, and encouraging those members, especially that aren't on the committee. You know, there's only 40 something of us on the Ways and Means Committee. There's 435 members of the House. So there's a lot of members that aren't every day knowledgeable of the tax provisions that are part of TCJA and what we're going to be trying to make permanent. So educating those members on those issues is really important, especially for business owners in their districts that obviously pay taxes and are a part of the community. It's important that they get that information directly from the people that are impacted.
Well, thank you so much. That's great advice. And thank you also, Congressman Steube, for being on this call with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
We hope you liked today's show. And if you did, please subscribe to our podcast, where each episode discusses the critical issues affecting generationally owned family businesses, family office as successful individuals around the country. You can find this podcast wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, thank you for listening.